HarperCollins presents Dalziel and Pascoe Hunt the Christmas Killer and Other Stories by Reginald Hill, read by Mike Rogers. Forward. It should come as no surprise to anyone that Reginald Hill won the Crime Writers Association Short Story Dagger not once, but twice. Although he is best remembered for his 4 dozen novels, half of them featuring the unforgettable duo of Andy Dalziel and Peter Pascoe, he was one of the most accomplished short story writers in the genre. But because the majority of short stories appear in magazines or anthologies, their lifespan is fleeting. That this collection has been rescued from oblivion is something to be grateful for. Here we can sit again with Dalziel and Pascoe and their aides-de-camp, Edgar Weald and Ellie Pascoe. But we can also experience some of the virtuoso range of Reggie's imagination as he takes us to the Germans in the First World War via a bargain with the devil, an impossible trail of footprints, and Elfland. And we have a front row seat at Reggie's feats of ventriloquism as he tells tales in a dazzling array of different voices. As Reg himself said, his non-series work is often about characters into whose lives crime comes, sometimes tragically, sometimes comically, but always engagingly. I'm often asked who I'm reading. I talk about recent discoveries, long-standing favourites whose latest books I fall on with delight, and a handful of writers whose books I reread. Reg is one of those repeat pleasures I always pick up with the same thrill of anticipation as I get from an impending encounter with an old friend. Rereading is the greatest compliment I can pay a writer. My shelves are stacked with titles waiting to be read for the first time. To choose to return for a second or third time to a book whose shape and ending I already know means I believe that as well as guaranteed pleasure, there is the promise of discovering something I've missed before. In the uncertainties of lockdown, like many of us, I revisited past printed companions. Reg never disappointed. I can still remember the delight of discovering Dalziel and Pascoe in their debut, A Clubbable Woman. It was one of those 1980s Grafton paperbacks with the uninspiring covers. I was in the cafe of the Royal Exchange Theatre in Manchester, where I used to hide from my newsroom colleagues so I could read instead of drink during my lunch break. As I read, I realised I was smiling. But not only because of the wit that permeates Reggie's writing. I was smiling because I had in my hands that particular delight, a crime novel that demonstrates that it's possible to write about murder and mayhem in good prose. Well-made sentences, felicitous choices of words, and the ability to create deft shifts of mood all revealed a level of literary craft that was unusual in British crime fiction back in the mid-1980s. For me, a fledgling crime writer struggling with her first novel, it set the bar high. And as Reg developed his skills through an impressive series of novels, he continued to provide me with a target to aim at. I always felt he was several steps ahead of me, and as well as enjoying his work, I learned from each of his novels how to mislead the reader, how to draw on other writers' work to enrich my own, not to be afraid to invest real emotion in the work, how to allow characters to carry the weight of their past, to have the courage to be complicated, and to include at least one word in every novel that drove me to the dictionary, an eleemosynary impulse from a generous teacher. He grew up in Yorkshire, in what he described as a very ordinary family. His father was a professional footballer for Hartlepool United, and his mother was a devoted reader of Golden Age detective novels, which Reg fetched for her from the library and began to read himself. A working-class lad, he made the impressive leap to St. Catherine's College, Oxford, where he immersed himself in English literature, not because he was pushed, but because he wanted to dive deep into something he loved. His books betray that love, peppered as they are with references to authors and works that illuminate what he was writing. But it's never about showing off. He was genuinely erudite, and it came naturally to him to provide an illusion that enriched his own storytelling. And those references are never heavy-handed. Recalled to Life opens with a perfectly crafted nod to Charles Dickens. It was the best of crime.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?